The sign for Black Creek barely hangs on anymore, rusted through and leaning like a drunkard against the skeletal remains of a stop sign nobody's obeyed in 30 years. You wouldn't even know a town used to be here if it wasn't for that sign and the improbable sight of my family's gas station and general store, stubbornly existing amidst the decay like a stubborn weed in cracked pavement. My name's Liam. I came back 3 months ago. Not because I wanted to, believe me. City life spat me out, chewed me up with rent I couldn't afford and jobs that evaporated faster than morning fog. So, I crawled back here, to the middle of nowhere, West Virginia, tail between my legs, to take care of Grandpa Eli. Grandpa Eli is the reason the store, Eli's last stop, still stands. He is the store, in a way. Or was. Now, he's mostly confined to the small apartment attached to the back, tethered to an oxygen tank, his mind wandering through foggy landscapes I can't follow. Lung cancer, the slow kind, the kind that steals a man piece by piece while you watch, helpless. He hasn't really spoken in weeks, just murmurs and coughs that rattle his thin frame. Black Creek died decades ago when the mine shut down. People just left. Houses stand hollow-eyed, roofs caved in, nature slowly reclaiming porches and driveways. Eli's last stop is the only pulse left, a weird anomaly on a stretch of Route 79 nobody travels unless they are lost or running from something. We don't get many customers. Tourists, maybe once a week, pulling in with confused looks, asking if we have Wi-Fi, we don't, or directions back to the interstate, which is 50 miles back the way they came. But then there are the others. They started appearing my second week back. Always after dusk, never before. They arrive in vehicles that look out of time, big, hulking sedans from the 50s or 60s, impossibly pristine, or sometimes beat-up pickup trucks that look like they haven't been manufactured since the 70s. The people are just as strange. Men in suits that look too formal, too stiff. Women in dresses that seem like costumes from a bygone era. They never use credit cards, always cash old bills sometimes, the kind with smaller presidents' faces. They don't talk much. They'll point to what they want, usually odd things we barely stock. Cans of lard, specific brands of motor oil that went out of production years ago, glass bottle sodas nobody drinks anymore, thick ropes, kerosene lamps. They never buy gas, which is weird for a gas station. They just get their items, pay the exact amount, not curtly, and leave, melting back into the night. They give me the creeps, their eyes seeming too dark, their movements too deliberate. Yesterday, while sweeping the perpetually dusty floor behind the counter, my broom hit something tucked underneath. A small, leather-bound notebook, worn smooth with age. Grandpa Eli's handwriting filled the pages, shaky now, but recognizable from old birthday cards. It wasn't a diary. It was a list. Rules. Rules for the last stop and the mine. Never approach the Black Creek mine after sundown. No matter what you hear or see. Certain customers require specific items only. Stick to the list, see page 12. Do not make substitutions or small talk. The basement door stays locked. Triple check the bolts every night before closing. If you hear the sirens, lock all doors immediately. Turn off exterior lights. Do not answer knocks. Do not look out the windows. Keep the generator fueled. Never let it run dry, especially during siren nights. Salt. Keep coarse salt by all entrances. Replace monthly. Never sell maps of the area, especially not maps showing the mine. If they ask for directions down below, tell them the passage is sealed. There were more pages of them, growing increasingly bizarre and specific. Page 12 listed names I didn't recognize alongside items like Mr. Abernathy, pickled eggs, kerosene only, or the tall woman, lard, twine only. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. This wasn't just Grandpa Eli losing his mind. This felt deliberate. Structured. Like instructions for managing something dangerous. I took the notebook back to the apartment later that evening. Grandpa Eli was dozing fitfully in his armchair, the hiss of his oxygen tank the only sound besides the rattling wind outside. I held the notebook, hesitating. "Grandpa," I whispered. His eyes fluttered open. They were cloudy, distant. But then they focused on the notebook in my hand. For a fleeting second, lucidity sparked within them, sharp and terrified. His hand, thin and papery, shot out and gripped my wrist with surprising strength. The rules? He rasped, the effort costing him each word a painful breath. Liam, keep the rules. His eyes rolled back slightly. They are coming, soon. His grip slackened, and he drifted back into his foggy state, leaving me standing there, heart pounding, the weight of the notebook suddenly feeling immense. They are coming soon. Who? That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old building, every gust of wind sounded like a footstep, a whisper. Around 2 a.m., I heard it. A low, rhythmic hum, almost subsonic, seeming to vibrate up through the floorboards. It sounded distant, maybe coming from the direction of the old mine shaft, a mile or so up the overgrown trail behind the store. Curiosity warred with the first rule, never approach the Black Creek mine after sundown. I went to the back window of the apartment, the one overlooking the dark woods leading towards the mine. At first, nothing. Just impenetrable darkness. Then, a faint light flickered deep within the trees. Not yellow like a flashlight, but a cold, pale blue, pulsing softly, rhythmically, in time with the low hum. I felt an irrational pull, a morbid curiosity urging me to go outside, to get a closer look. As I reached for the back door, Grandpa Eli stirred in his chair. No. He moaned, his voice thick with sleep or delirium. Don't go. His words, weak as they were enough to break the spell. I backed away from the door, the memory of his terrified lucidity flashing in my mind. I stayed by the window, watching the pulsing blue light. It seemed to grow slightly brighter, the low hum intensifying. And then, carried on the wind, faint but unmistakable, came another sound. High-pitched, ethereal, almost like singing, but wrong somehow. Warped? It sounded like a siren. Rule number 4, if you hear the sirens, lock all doors immediately. Turn off exterior lights. Do not answer knocks. Do not look out the windows. Panic seized me. I scrambled, checking the flimsy lock on the apartment door, then rushed into the dark, silent store. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the deadbolt on the main entrance, the heavy clack echoing in the emptiness. The back storeroom door, locked. The basement door, I checked the 3 heavy bolts Grandpa Eli had installed, making sure each was secure. The sirens grew louder, closer, the unnatural melody weaving through the howling wind. It wasn't just one siren, it sounded like multiple, overlapping, creating a disorienting, nauseating harmony. I ran to the main circuit breaker behind the counter and flipped the switch for the outside lights, plunging the immediate area around the store into deeper darkness. Heart hammering against my ribs, I backed away from the windows, retreating towards the center of the store, crouching behind the counter, the rule echoing in my head, do not look out the windows. The sirens wailed, seemingly circling the store now, the sound pressing in from all sides. The blue light from the woods was gone, or maybe just obscured by the sheer intensity of the auditory assault. Then came the knocking. Not frantic, but slow, deliberate. Thump, 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 on the front door. Rule number 4, do not answer knocks. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for it to stop, for morning to come. The notebook of rules felt like lead in my pocket. What had Grandpa Eli gotten us into? What was sealed in that mine? And what, exactly, was coming for us now? Thump, thump, thump. The knocking continued, patient, persistent, a chilling counterpoint to the unholy wailing of the sirens outside. The knocking didn't stop. Thump, thump, thump. It echoed the frantic beat of my own heart against my ribs. Each slow, deliberate impact on the thick wood of the front door felt heavier than the last, like something was testing the frame, judging its strength. The sirens continued their maddening chorus outside, a swirling vortex of sound that made it impossible to think straight. I stayed low behind the counter, clutching the worn notebook, the rules feeling both useless and terrifyingly relevant. Do not answer knocks. Do not look out the windows. Easy enough to follow when you're paralyzed by fear. Grandpa Eli hadn't made a sound from the apartment. Was he even still breathing? The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I couldn't leave the store, couldn't check on him. Not while this was happening. The knocking shifted. It moved from the front door, traveling along the exterior wall toward the side windows, the tall, grimy panes that looked out onto the empty space where the neighboring building had collapsed years ago. Thump, 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 closer now. I squeezed my eyes shut tighter, pressing myself flatter against the cold linoleum floor, praying the flimsy curtains were drawn tight enough. They weren't. I always left a gap near the bottom. Idiot. Through the narrow slit between the curtain and the sill, I saw movement. Not a person, not exactly. Just a shape, unnaturally tall and thin, silhouetted against the ambient, non-existent light that seemed to accompany the sirens. It paused directly outside the window, and the knocking stopped. Silence descended, broken only by the wailing sirens and the ragged sound of my own breathing. Then, a scratching sound began. Fingernails? Claws? Scraping slowly down the glass, leaving faint trails in the grime. My blood ran cold. It knew I was here. It knew I was watching, even though I wasn't supposed to be. Suddenly, Grandpa Eli coughed from the apartment, a deep, rattling sound that tore through the silence. The scratching on the window immediately stopped. The tall silhouette lingered for a moment, then seemed to glide away, disappearing from view. The sirens began to recede, their volume slowly diminishing, fading back towards the direction of the mine until only the wind remained. I didn't move for what felt like an eternity, listening to the pounding in my ears gradually subside. Cautiously, I risked a peek over the counter. The store was empty, silent, bathed only in the faint moonlight filtering through the dusty front windows. The ordeal was over. For tonight. Shakily, I got to my feet, my legs stiff and trembling. My first instinct was to check on Grandpa. I unlocked the apartment door and found him seemingly asleep in his chair, his breathing shallow but steady. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. Whatever that was outside, it hadn't gotten in. Returning to the store, I forced myself to do a perimeter check, my hand gripping the small flashlight I kept under the counter. The doors were still locked, the bolts secure. I peered through the front window, nothing. Just the desolate road and the skeletal remains of Black Creek under the moonlight. I checked the side window where the scratching had occurred. Faint vertical lines marred the dirt on the glass, confirming I hadn't imagined it. My gaze drifted towards the basement door, tucked away in the shadowed corner behind the rusty beverage coolers. Rule number 3, the basement door stays locked. Triple check the bolts every night before closing. I approached it, hard hammering again. The 3 heavy bolts were firmly in place, just as I'd left them. But as I reached out to test them, I heard a faint sound from the other side. A soft, rhythmic dripping. Drip, drip, drip. Water leak? We hadn't had rain in days. I pressed my ear against the cold wood. The dripping continued, steady, persistent. And underneath it, almost too low to hear, was another sound. A faint, wet, shuffling noise. Like something heavy being dragged across a damp concrete floor. I recoiled from the door as if burned, a new, deeper dread settling in my stomach. What was down there? What was Grandpa Eli keeping locked away? I backed away, deciding I didn't want to know. Not now. I needed sleep. I retreated to the apartment, locking the door behind me and wedging a chair under the knob, just in case. Sleep didn't come easy, filled with flashing images of tall shadows, scratching claws, and the echoing drip from behind the basement door. The next day passed in a haze of exhaustion and paranoia. I jumped at every sound, scrutinized the few lost travelers who stopped for directions, half expecting them to have the same dead eyes as the strange customers Grandpa's notebook described. I reread the rules, trying to make sense of them, especially the list of names and specific items. Who was Mr. Abernathy? Why only pickled eggs and kerosene? Who was the tall woman? Around midday, while trying to decipher a particularly cryptic rule about lunar alignments and deliveries, I found a loose page tucked near the back of the notebook. It wasn't a rule, but a drawing. A rough, hand-drawn map. It showed the layout of Eli's last stop, the surrounding woods, and marked a path leading to the Black Creek mine. But it also showed something else, a series of tunnels underneath the store, connecting directly to the basement and then branching out towards the mine itself. Arrows indicated points labeled weak point, salt barrier, and, ominously, feeding chamber, near the mine entrance symbol. My blood chilled. The basement wasn't just a cellar, it was an entrance. An entrance to whatever lurked in or came from that abandoned mine. The dripping, the shuffling, it wasn't just something down there, it was potentially connected to the source of the sirens, the blue light, the things Grandpa Eli feared. As dusk began to settle, casting long shadows across the decaying town, a car pulled into the station. Not one of the usual lost tourists, and not one of the strange, anachronistic vehicles. This was a late model, nondescript sedan, the kind favored by government agents or private investigators in movies. A man got out, dressed in a plain grey suit, sharp, observant eyes scanning the surroundings before landing on me as I stood warily in the doorway. He wasn't on the list in Grandpa's notebook. "Fill her up?" I asked, forcing normalcy into my voice, my hand instinctively hovering near the tire iron I kept behind the door. He didn't respond immediately, just approached the entrance, stopping a few feet away. His gaze swept over the dusty shelves, the flickering fluorescent lights, lingering for a moment on the basement door in the corner before returning to me. "Eli home?" he asked, his voice smooth, professional, devoid of any discernible accent. "He's not well," I said cautiously. "Sleeping mostly. Can I help you with something?" The man tilted his head slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Just passing through. Heard this place had history." He took another step closer. "My name's Arthur. I'm interested in local folklore. Especially concerning the old mine. Every nerve ending screamed danger. This wasn't random. He knows. Not much folklore around here," I lied, keeping my stance defensive. "Just an old closed down mine. Dangerous place. Best stay away." Arthur smiled, a thin, humorless expression. "Oh, I'm always careful. But some stories, they am persistent. Stories about lights, sounds, disappearances." His eyes flicked again towards the basement door. "And things that are kept." Before I could respond, the bell above the door jingled. We both turned. Standing there, silhouetted against the dying light, was a woman. Impossibly tall, unnervingly thin, dressed in a severe, old-fashioned black dress that seemed to swallow the light around her. Her face was obscured by shadow and the wide brim of a dark hat. "Lard," she said, her voice a dry rustle, like autumn leaves skittering across pavement. "And twine." My breath hitched. The tall woman, lard, twine only. She was real. She was here. Arthur turned slowly to face her, his professional mask cracking, revealing a momentary flash of recognition. Fear? The tall woman ignored him, her hidden gaze fixed on me. "The passage," she rasped, taking a step inside, her movement unnervingly fluid, silent despite her height. "Is it sealed?" Rule number 8, if they ask for directions down below, tell them the passage is sealed. My mouth felt dry as dust. "It's sealed," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. The tall woman tilted her head, a motion that was disturbingly bird-like. Arthur had taken a step back, his hand subtly moving towards the inside of his suit jacket. The air crackled with tension. Outside, the last sliver of the sun dipped below the horizon. Night had fallen on Eli's last stop. The air in the store thickened, charged and heavy. The tall woman stood just inside the doorway, a pool of shadow coalescing around her feet, seemingly absorbing the weak light from the overhead fluorescence. Her face remained hidden beneath the hat's brim, but I felt her unseen eyes fixed on me. Arthur, the man in the grey suit, stood tense between us, his hand still inside his jacket. "Sealed," I repeated, my voice steadier this time, though my heart felt like it was trying to batter its way out of my chest. "The passage is sealed. Permanently." The tall woman didn't react for a long moment. The only sounds were the hum of the ancient coolers and the faint, rhythmic dripping from the basement. Then, she extended a hand along, pale fingers emerging from the black sleeve. The movement was slow, deliberate. Lard, she rustled. Twine. I didn't move. My eyes flickered towards Arthur. He hadn't drawn a weapon, but his posture was coiled, ready. Get her what she needs, Liam, Arthur said quietly, his gaze locked on the woman. His use of my name sent another jolt through me. He knew who I was. Swallowing hard, I edged behind the counter, keeping both Arthur and the tall woman in my line of sight. My hands shook as I located the dusty can of lard and the spool of rough twine on the bottom shelf, items no one had bought in months, maybe years. I placed them carefully on the counter, next to the old-fashioned cash register. The tall woman glided forward, silent as smoke. She placed a few crumpled, old-looking dollar bills on the counter, the exact amount. Her long fingers wrapped around the lard and twine. For a terrifying second, her hand brushed mine, and an unnatural coldness seeped into my skin, like touching dry ice. Then, just as silently as she arrived, she turned and glided back out the door, disappearing into the now complete darkness outside. The bell above the door remained eerily still. As soon as she was gone, Arthur visibly relaxed, though his hand remained inside his jacket. He let out a slow breath. You handle that well, he said, his professional tone returning, though his eyes were sharp, appraising. You know the rules, then. It wasn't a question. Who are you? I demanded, moving away from the counter, putting some distance between us. How do you know my name? How do you know about the rules? Arthur's lips thinned. Let's just say I have an interest in Eli's arrangements. And in the Black Creek mine. He stepped further into the store, his gaze sweeping the room again, inevitably landing on the triple-bolted basement door. You keep anything interesting down there these days? It's just a basement, I snapped, moving instinctively to block his view. Storage. Nothing more. Really? Arthur walked towards it, stopping just short of the coolers. Because the energy signatures I've been tracking suggest otherwise. Strong signals. Getting stronger, too. Especially after events. He looked pointedly at me. Like last night's. My stomach clenched. Energy signatures? Tracking? I don't know what you're talking about, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Arthur chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Don't you? The sirens, Liam. The lights. The visitors. Eli didn't teach you anything before his mind went. My grandfather is sick, I said defensively. He doesn't talk much sense anymore. Maybe, Arthur conceded, his eyes still fixed on the basement door. Or maybe he knew things he didn't want others to know. Things about what comes out of that mine. Things about what he might have put down there. The dripping sound from the basement seemed to echo louder in the sudden silence. The shuffling noise started again, closer this time, right behind the door. Arthur heard it too. His head cocked slightly, a new intensity in his gaze. Sounds like you've got rats, he said, his voice deceptively casual. Or something bigger. He took a step towards the door. Mind if I take a look? Stay away from it, I warned, stepping in front of him, my hand gripping the tire iron I'd retrieved from behind the door. It's off limits. Store policy. Arthur raised an eyebrow, looking from the tire iron to my face. Getting protective? Does Eli have you guarding the cellar now, too? He sighed. Look, Liam, I'm not your enemy. Not necessarily. But things are escalating around here. The activity from the mine, the frequency of the unusual customers. Last night wasn't normal, even for this place. Something's changing. Whatever Eli set up here, whatever balance he struck, it's starting to fail. What do you know about the mine? I pressed, ignoring his assessment. Enough, Arthur said curtly. Enough to know it's not just an abandoned shaft. It's a connection point. A weak spot. And whatever Eli locked in that basement is likely tied to it. Maybe he thought he could contain it, study it. Maybe he made a deal. Grandpa Eli made a deal. The idea seemed ludicrous, yet a sliver of doubt entered my mind. The rules, the strange customers, the basement. You need to leave, I said, hefting the tire iron slightly. Now. Arthur studied me for a long moment. All right, Liam. For now. But I'll be back. And if you're smart, you'll figure out what's really going on before it's too late. He pulled his hand from his jacket, empty, and held it up placatingly. Just some advice? Check Eli's notes again. Look for anything about deliveries, schedules, lunar cycles. He gave a curt nod and walked out, getting into his sedan and driving off towards the highway, leaving me alone in the oppressive silence of the store. Deliveries? Lunar cycles? I immediately went for Grandpa Eli's notebook, flipping through the pages past the rules, past the customer list. Near the end, I found entries that weren't rules, just dates and cryptic notes. October 12th, new moon. Abernathy delivery due. Salt levels low. October 26th, full moon. Siren night expected. Check generator fuel. Reinforce basement bolts. November 11th, new moon. Tall woman visit likely. Ensure twine stock. November 25th, full moon. Siren night. High probability. Secure perimeter. My eyes scanned the calendar on the wall. Tonight was October 27th. Just past the full moon. Last night was a siren night, just as the notebook predicted. And the next new moon, Abernathy's delivery, was November 11th. Who was Abernathy, and what was he delivering? And why did it coincide with the new moon? I checked the customer list again, Mr. Abernathy, pickled eggs, kerosene only. It made no sense. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the basement, rattling the door against its bolts. It sounded like metal striking concrete, followed by a series of frantic scrabbling noises and then, silence. The dripping stopped. The shuffling stopped. I stood frozen, listening intently. Nothing. The silence was somehow more unnerving than the noises had been. Had something gotten out? Or had something else gotten in? Hesitantly, I approached the basement door, flashlight beam trembling. The bolts were still secure. I pressed my ear to the wood, straining to hear anything. Silence. Complete, utter silence. But the oppressive feeling, the sense of wrongness emanating from the other side, was stronger than ever. I checked the bolts again, pulling on them with all my strength. Secure. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. Arthur's warning, the notebook's predictions, the crash in the basement, things were definitely escalating. Grandpa Eli's fragile system was breaking down. As I retreated towards the relative safety of the apartment, my flashlight beam swept across the floor near the basement door. Something small and dark lay on the linoleum, something that hadn't been there before. I bent down cautiously. It was a single, large, black feather. Too large for a crow or raven. It felt strangely coarse, almost metallic to the touch, and seemed to absorb the light from my flashlight. Where had it come from? I hadn't seen any birds, and it certainly hadn't come from Arthur or the tall woman. Could it have somehow slipped out from under the basement door? The thought made me shudder. I left the feather where it lay, not wanting to touch it again. Whatever was happening here, it was bigger and stranger than I could comprehend. And I had a sinking feeling that the rules in Grandpa Eli's notebook weren't just instructions anymore. They were the only things keeping the real horrors at bay. Another night bled into a tense, grey dawn. Sleep had been a fragmented thing, punctuated by phantom dripping sounds and the imagined scraping of claws on glass. I kept the apartment door wedged shut and Grandpa Eli's notebook clutched tight, the black feather I'd found near the basement door lying heavy on my mind, though I'd left it untouched on the store floor. Grandpa Eli seemed weaker this morning. His breathing was shallower, his eyes barely fluttered open when I brought him his meager breakfast of lukewarm oatmeal. He didn't speak, didn't seem to recognize me. His earlier flash of lucidity, the terrified warning about the rules, felt like a distant dream. Was his decline just the cancer, or was it tied to the escalating strangeness of this place, the failing balance Arthur had mentioned? The day dragged. No customers, not even lost tourists. Just the oppressive silence of the decaying town and the wind whistling through the broken panes of abandoned houses nearby. I tried calling my cousin back in the city, someone, anyone, to break the isolation, to tell them something was wrong. But the landline, just as Rule 9 hinted and Arthur's appearance confirmed wasn't entirely isolated, was dead. Completely silent. My cell phone remained stubbornly disconnected, displaying no service. I was cut off. Frustrated and increasingly anxious, I turned my attention back to Grandpa Eli's notebook and the map I'd found. The tunnels connecting the basement to the mine, how could they exist? The store wasn't that old. Had Grandpa built them? Or were they older, something he discovered and perhaps tried to seal off, unsuccessfully? The map showed the basement as a central point, a hub connecting to multiple passages leading towards the mine area. One tunnel was marked flooded. Another pointed towards a section labeled Cave-in, Pre-Eli. And the one leading to the feeding chamber, near the mine symbol seemed unnervingly direct. I needed more information. Arthur knew things, but trusting him felt dangerous. Who did he work for? What was his real agenda? I risked using the store's ancient, dial-up era computer, hoping the internet connection might flicker to life long enough for a quick search. After several agonizing minutes of screeching modem sounds, I managed a fragile connection. Searching for Arthur and Black Creek Mine yielded nothing relevant. Energy signatures plus West Virginia brought up scientific articles and conspiracy theories about ley lines. But searching for Black Creek Mine disappearances hit something. Buried in the archives of a regional newspaper website was a short article from the late 1970s. Local man vanishes near disused Black Creek Mine. The article detailed the disappearance of a hiker named Thomas Abernathy who was last seen heading towards the notoriously unstable mine area. No trace was ever found. Abernathy. The name from Grandpa's notebook. Mr. Abernathy, pickled eggs, kerosene only. Delivery due November 11th, new moon. Before I could delve deeper, the connection died, leaving me staring at a cannot display page error. Thomas Abernathy. Had he become one of the strange customers? Was his delivery related to whatever ritual or event happened during the new moon? Pickled eggs and kerosene, it made less sense than ever. The rest of the afternoon was spent pacing, checking the locks, rereading the rules, and glancing nervously at the silent basement door. The black feather remained undisturbed on the floor, a dark omen I couldn't bring myself to touch or remove. As dusk approached, the familiar sense of dread began to build. Another night, potentially another Siren night aftermath, or perhaps something worse. I checked the generator fuel. As per the notes associated with the full moon, it was nearly full. I reinforced the salt lines by the main entrance and the apartment door, the coarse crystals feeling flimsy and superstitious against the growing unease. Around 8 p.m., headlights cut through the twilight. My hand immediately went to the tire iron. But this wasn't Arthur's sedan, nor one of the strange vintage cars. It was a battered, mud-splattered pickup truck, older model, maybe late 80s, with a dented grille and a mismatched tailgate. It pulled up near the pumps, engine sputtering. A man climbed out, looking rougher than the truck. He was burly, dressed in stained overalls and a worn flannel jacket, unshaven, with tired, bloodshot eyes. He looked like he'd been driving for days. He wasn't on the list. Need gas? I called out cautiously from the doorway. The man squinted at me, then spat on the ground. Engines running rough. Got any oil? The heavy kind. Pickled eggs. My blood turned to ice. Pickled eggs. It wasn't Abernathy's delivery night, wasn't the new moon. But this man. What kind of oil? I asked, my voice tight. Don't matter. Thickest you got, he grumbled, walking towards the store, his boots crunching heavily on the gravel. He moved with a strange, almost lumbering gait. As he got closer, I caught his scent, an earthy, damp smell, like freshly turned soil, and something else, something metallic, like old blood. He stopped in front of me, looking me up and down. You Eli's boy? Grandson, I corrected, keeping the tire iron partially hidden behind my leg. "Is not well." The man grunted. "Hurt?" He peered past me into the store, his gaze lingering on the basement door. "Place looks the same." He looked back at me, a strange light flickering in his bloodshot eyes. "He's still keeping things down there." Before I could answer, he lurched forward, not attacking, but stumbling, catching himself on the door frame. He coughed, a wet, racking sound, and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. I saw a dark smear on his glove. Need the eggs," he rasped, his voice suddenly weaker. "And the oil." Warily, I retrieved the specific brand of ancient motor oil and the jar of pickled eggs from the shelf, placing them on the counter. He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a wad of cash, exact change, mostly older bills. As he reached for the items, his sleeve rolled up, revealing his forearm. It was covered in dark, soil-like grime, but underneath, strange symbols were crudely tattooed or branded into his skin. Symbols that looked disturbingly similar to the etchings Sarah had described on the stone slabs in the cellar registry chamber back at the crossroads. Inspired element, not a direct quote from provided text. And nestled among them, partially obscured by dirt, was what looked like a fresh wound, a deep, circular puncture mark, oozing slightly. He snatched the items, stuffing the oil into a pocket and clutching the jar of eggs. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at me, his expression unreadable. "Moon's Chanjin," he muttered. "Tell Eli, the delivery might be early. He'll know." He lumbered back to his truck, climbed in, and drove off, engine sputtering, back the way he came. I stood there, stunned. Delivery might be early. Abernathy? But it wasn't the new moon. And those symbols, that wound, what was going on? Then I heard it. A faint click from the basement door. Followed by another. And another. Like the bolts were being tested. From the inside. I backed away slowly, grabbing the flashlight. The clicking stopped. Silence returned, thicker, heavier than before. Was the man in the truck connected to whatever was down there? Was he delivering something to it? Or warning me about it? My flashlight beam landed again on the black feather lying near the door. It seemed darker now, almost pulsating in the dim light. And I realized with a fresh wave of horror that it wasn't lying flat anymore. Its tip was slightly raised, pointing directly at the basement door. The black feather didn't move, yet its silent accusation, its unwavering point towards the basement door, screamed louder than any siren. My breath hitched. It wasn't just debris blown in by the wind or dropped by some unfortunate bird. It was a sign. A marker. Or maybe a key. The thought sent a fresh wave of revulsion through me. I backed away, flashlight beam shaking, the image of the feather's slightly raised tip burned into my mind. The silence from the basement was absolute now, profound. The earlier clicks on the bolts, the dripping, the shuffling all gone, replaced by a heavy, watchful stillness that felt far more threatening. It was like holding your breath before a lightning strike, knowing the impact was inevitable. Delivery might be early. The rough man's words echoed. Whatever usually happened on the new moon, whatever Abernathy delivered, it was coming sooner. And whatever was locked in the basement knew it. Was it waiting? Preparing? Driven by a desperate need to do something, anything, I forced myself back towards the basement door. I didn't dare touch it. Instead, I knelt, aiming the flashlight beam at the narrow gap underneath. Dust motes danced in the light. I saw nothing but the rough concrete floor just beyond the threshold. No shadows, no movement. I sniffed cautiously. The usual musty, damp cellar smell was there, but beneath it, fainter now but still present, was that coppery tang of old blood I'd noticed from the man in the truck, mixed with the cloying scent of damp earth. And something else. A faint trace of ozone, like the air after an electrical storm. It made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I retreated again, my mind racing. Lunar cycles. Arthur had mentioned lunar cycles. Grandpa Eli's notes confirmed their importance: new moon deliveries, full moon siren nights. Tonight was neither. It was a waning crescent, days away from the new moon Abernathy was supposedly due for. Why early? What had changed? Was it me? Had my brief trip down the mine path, my encounter with the thing during the Siren night, though I hadn't seen it, just heard and felt it, somehow disturbed the balance Arthur spoke of? Or was it Arthur himself? His snooping, his energy signatures. I went back to the apartment. Grandpa Eli was still in his chair, oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. His eyes were closed, his face pale and sunken. He looked smaller, frailer than ever. Grandpa. I knelt beside him, holding up the notebook. Grandpa, the delivery. The man said it might be early. What does that mean? What's Abernathy delivering? No response. Just the quiet hiss of the oxygen. Grandpa, please, I urged, my voice cracking. What did you lock down there? Is it Abernathy? The one who disappeared? His eyelids fluttered. For a moment, his gaze met mine, unfocused, clouded. Then, a flicker. Not lucidity this time, but fear? Recognition? His lips moved, forming a single, almost inaudible word. Hungry. His eyes closed again, and his breathing hitched before settling back into its shallow rhythm. Hungry. The word hung in the air, cold and sharp. Whatever was in the basement was hungry. And its delivery was coming early. A cold certainty washed over me. I couldn't stay here. The flimsy locks on the doors, the salt lines, Grandpa's cryptic rules, they felt like tissue paper against a rising tide. Arthur was right, the system was failing. My eyes fell on the hand-drawn map lying open on the small table where I'd left the notebook. The tunnels. Connecting the basement to the mine. An escape route? Or a path leading directly into the heart of the horror? The map showed multiple passages. Maybe one led away from the mine, somewhere safer. It was a long shot, based on a crude drawing I barely understood. I had to try. Waiting here felt like suicide. Gathering my resolve, I started prepping. I found Grandpa Eli's old hunting backpack in a closet, dusty but sturdy. Into it went the notebook, the flashlight, spare batteries, a first aid kit, the few remaining bottles of water, some non-perishable food from the store shelves, crackers, canned beans, grim choices, but better than nothing, a box cutter, and a tire iron. It wouldn't fit inside, so I rigged it to the side with duct tape. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. I checked on Grandpa one last time. Leaving him felt like a betrayal, but dragging him with me was impossible. He was too frail, and I didn't even know if the tunnels were passable. I adjusted his oxygen mask, made sure his blanket was secure. "I'll come back, Grandpa," I whispered, knowing it was a promise I might not be able to keep. "I promise." Back in the store, I took a deep breath and approached the basement door. The black feather still lay there, its tip still aimed squarely at the lock. I ignored it, focusing on the heavy bolts. My hands trembled as I slid back the first one, the metallic scrape echoing unnaturally loud in the silence. The second bolt. The third. The door was unlocked. I hesitated, listening. Still nothing. Just that heavy, watchful silence. Taking another shaky breath, I gripped the cold metal doorknob and turned. The door swung inward easily, silently, revealing a set of steep, narrow wooden stairs descending into pitch blackness. The smell hit me immediately: damp earth, stale air, blood, ozone, and something else, a fetid, rotting sweetness that turned my stomach. Flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, I took the first step down. The wood creaked ominously under my weight. Second step. Third. The air grew colder, heavier. My flashlight beam danced nervously, revealing damp concrete walls covered in patches of black mold, cobwebs thick as shrouds hanging from the low ceiling joists. Halfway down, I stopped. The beam landed on something at the bottom of the stairs. Not the black feather from upstairs, but more feathers. Dozens of them, scattered across the dirt floor, identical to the first. And among them, bones. Small ones, splintered and gnawed. Bird bones? Rat bones? Image looking down dark basement stairs, flashlight beam illuminating feathers and small bones at the bottom. And the source of the dripping sound became clear. It wasn't water. Thick, dark, viscous fluid dripped slowly from the ceiling joist directly above the pile of feathers and bones, splattering onto the floor with a soft, sickening plink. It looked like oil, or maybe blood? No, it was too dark, too thick. Holding my breath against the stench, I forced myself down the remaining steps, landing softly on the dirt floor. My flashlight swept the small basement space. Rough concrete walls, packed earth floor. Shelves lined one wall, holding rusted cans, old tools, glass jars filled with murky liquids. In the center of the room sat a hulking shape covered by a heavy canvas top. But my attention was immediately drawn to the far wall. Just as the map indicated, a rough opening, like a low archway, was visible, leading into darkness. The entrance to the tunnels. And crudely painted on the wall above it, in what looked disturbingly like dried blood, was a symbol, a circle with 3 jagged lines radiating outwards. Suddenly, a skittering sound came from behind the top in the center of the room. I froze, aiming the flashlight beam. The top rustled. Something small and fast darted out from underneath, a rat, huge and greasy, its eyes glinting red in the beam before it disappeared into a crack in the wall. Just a rat. Relief warred with disgust. I approached the top-covered object cautiously. It was roughly rectangular, maybe 6 feet long and 3 feet high. What had Grandpa hidden down here? With the tire iron held ready, I reached out and slowly pulled back a corner of the heavy canvas. Underneath was metal. Cold, dark, riveted metal. It looked like a cage? No, more like a box. An old, iron-bound chest or container, reinforced with thick bands of steel, secured with multiple heavy padlocks. Faint scratches marred the metal surface around the locks. What was inside? Why was it locked so securely? As I stared at the chest, a low hum began, almost imperceptible at first, vibrating up through the dirt floor. The same subsonic hum I'd heard the night before, coming from the mine. It grew steadily louder, accompanied by a faint, pulsing blue light emanating from the tunnel entrance on the far wall. The delivery. It was starting. Panic surged. I abandoned the chest, scrambling towards the tunnel entrance. This was my only way out. As I reached the archway, the blue light intensified, pulsing faster, casting eerie shadows across the basement. The hum vibrated in my teeth. And from deep within the tunnel, echoing up from the direction of the mine, came the first, faint, unearthly notes of the sirens. The pulsing blue light from the tunnel entrance painted the damp basement walls in rhythmic, ghostly strokes. The low hum wasn't just audible anymore. It was a physical pressure against my eardrums, vibrating through the soles of my boots. And the sirens, faint but growing, their unearthly melody slithered up from the tunnel's depths, promising something ancient and hungry. Hungry. Grandpa's last whispered word. There was no more time to think about the locked chest, the dripping ichor, or the scattered feathers and bones. Escape. Now. Clutching the flashlight in one hand and gripping the tire iron strap to my backpack with the other, I plunged into the arched opening, into the oppressive darkness beyond the pulsing blue threshold. The air immediately changed, colder, damper, thick with the smell of wet earth, decay, and that sharp ozone tang. The crude symbol painted above the entrance seemed to watch me go, a silent warning. The tunnel was narrow, forcing me to turn slightly sideways to accommodate the backpack. Rough-hewn rock scraped against my shoulders. Water trickled down the walls, reflecting the flashlight beam in shimmering, distorted patterns. My footsteps echoed unnervingly, swallowed by the growing hum and the insidious wail of the sirens ahead. The blue light seemed to emanate from deeper within, its pulse quickening, matching the frantic beat in my chest. I fumbled for the map inside my jacket pocket, trying to orient myself with the flashlight. According to Grandpa's drawing, this main passage should continue for some distance before branching. I just had to keep moving, putting distance between myself and whatever horror might be unfolding back in the basement. As if summoned by the thought, a sound echoed from behind me, a heavy, metallic clang that reverberated through the tunnel. My blood ran cold. The chest. Had something opened the padlocked chest back in the basement? Or worse, had something broken out of it? Fear spurred me onward. I stumbled through the darkness, flashlight beam bouncing erratically. The tunnel floor was uneven, littered with loose rocks and slick patches of mud. The air grew heavier, making each breath feel like an effort. The humming intensified, a physical vibration now, shaking the very rock around me. After maybe 10 minutes of frantic progress, the tunnel opened slightly into a small, cave-like chamber. Water pooled ankle-deep on the floor, stagnant and foul-smelling. And here, the passage split. Just as the map indicated. To the left, a narrower opening, choked with debris, marked on the map with a question mark and the word, flooded. To the right, a slightly larger passage that seemed to descend further, marked with an arrow pointing towards the mine and the chilling label, feeding chamber. Straight ahead, almost hidden behind a curtain of dripping water, was a third, smaller fissure, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. This one corresponded to the weak point notation on the map. The sirens were much louder now, echoing from the right-hand passage, the path towards the mine. The blue light pulsed rhythmically from that direction too. Logic dictated avoiding the direct route to whatever nightmare awaited there. The flooded passage seemed impassable, or at least incredibly risky. That left the weak point. What did Grandpa mean by that? Structurally unstable? Easily breached? Or a weak spot in their defenses? Another sound from behind, closer this time. A wet, dragging, shuffling noise, accompanied by a low, guttural breathing. The sound I'd heard through the basement door earlier. It wasn't just in the basement anymore. It was in the tunnel. It was following me. Decision made. There was no time for deliberation. Shoving the map back into my pocket, I splashed through the stagnant water towards the narrow fissure marked weak point. It looked barely passable, jagged rocks threatening to snag my clothes and backpack. Just as I reached it, a blast of fetid air washed over me from the passage I'd just exited. The shuffling sound was right behind me. I didn't dare turn around, didn't dare shine my light back. I threw myself into the fissure, scraping my already battered body against the sharp rock. The space was incredibly tight. I had to exhale to squeeze through, the rock pressing in on my chest and back. My backpack snagged. Panic flared as I imagined claws grabbing my feet, dragging me back. I twisted violently, ripping the fabric of the pack but freeing myself, propelling my body forward through the tightest point. I tumbled out into another tunnel, slightly wider than the fissure, gasping for breath, the sounds from the main passage muffled now, though the sirens still echoed faintly, seemingly from a different direction. I scrambled to my feet, shining the flashlight back at the fissure. Nothing emerged. Had it given up? Or was it simply too large to follow? The relief was short-lived. This new tunnel felt different. Drier, dustier. The air didn't carry the same overwhelming stench of decay, but there was a new smell, sharp, acrid, almost chemical. And the walls, they weren't rough-hewn rock anymore. They were smoother, lined with crumbling brickwork in places, interspersed with sections of rusting metal pipes and conduits. It looked like an old service tunnel, maybe part of the original mine workings, long abandoned. The map hadn't shown this level of detail. It just indicated a passage running roughly parallel to the main tunnel network, eventually, hopefully, leading away from the mine area. I started moving again, slower this time, listening intently. The sirens were fainter here, muffled by the earth and rock, but the low hum persisted, a constant, unnerving presence. Then I saw the markings. Scratched crudely into the brickwork, illuminated by my wavering beam. Not the strange symbols I'd seen on the man's arm or above the tunnel entrance. These were simpler, more desperate. Arrows pointing forward. Dates years apart, some recent, some decades old. Names. T. Abernathy, 1978. S. Miller, 1985. J. Doe, 1999. Help. Others had been here. Others who knew about this passage. Abernathy, he'd used this tunnel. Had he escaped? Or was this where he met his end? Further along, the tunnel sloped downwards. The acrid smell grew stronger. And then I saw the light ahead. Not the pulsing blue, but a dim, flickering, sickly yellow-green glow, emanating from around a sharp bend. It cast long, dancing shadows back towards me. Instinct screamed trap. Every horror movie trope flashed through my mind. But the tunnel seemed to end here, and the alternative was going back towards whatever was shuffling through the main passages. Cautiously, tire iron held ready, I approached the bend, staying low, trying to peer around the corner without exposing myself. The yellow-green light flickered erratically, casting the area beyond in a nauseating glow. It came from strange, phosphorescent fungi clinging to the walls and ceiling of a larger cavern. The air here was thick with spores, catching the light like morbid glitter, and the chemical smell was overpowering. In the center of the cavern, partially submerged in a pool of viscous, glowing green sludge, lay a tangled mass of something. Metal, wires, broken glass, fused together in a bizarre, unnatural structure. It looked like the wreckage of some complex machine, half dissolved by the glowing ooze it sat in. And scattered around the edges of the pool, half buried in the mud and glowing fungus, were more bones. Larger ones this time. Ribcages. Skulls, disturbingly human-like, but subtly wrong. Elongated jaws, empty sockets that seemed too large. Whatever light and safety I had hoped for wasn't here. This was something else. A dumping ground? A failed experiment? As I watched, a bubble formed on the surface of the green sludge, grew, and popped with a soft, wet sigh, releasing a puff of acrid vapor. Suddenly, a shape detached itself from the shadows on the far side of the cavern. Tall, gaunt, moving with a jerky, unnatural gait. It wasn't one of the creatures from the mine path, nor did it look like the shuffling thing from the basement tunnel. This was something else entirely, silhouetted against the putrid green glow. It turned its head slowly towards me, and even in the dim, flickering light, I saw the glint of metal where its eyes should have been. The figure in the cavern didn't move like anything human. Its limbs seemed too long, joints bending at awkward, unnatural angles as it straightened from the shadows. The sickly yellow-green glow of the fungi reflected dully off its metallic eyes. They weren't just glinting, they looked like polished ball bearings set deep into a gaunt, featureless face. It wore remnants of clothing, tattered, rotted fabric hanging off its skeletal frame like macabre decorations. Wires and thin metal tubes snaked in and out of its flesh in places, disappearing under the rags. It looked like a horrifying fusion of man and decaying machine, something cobbled together and abandoned. My breath caught in my throat. I stayed frozen at the tunnel entrance, half hidden by the bend, flashlight beam fixed on the creature. It hadn't fully registered me yet, its head slowly swiveling, metallic eyes clicking faintly as they scanned the cavern. It seemed incomplete. Damaged. Was this one of Grandpa's arrangements? Something he trapped or created? Or was it a victim, like Abernathy, transformed by whatever lurked in this toxic grotto? The creature's head snapped towards the pool of green sludge. It took a jerky step closer, one leg dragging slightly, making a faint scraping sound on the cavern floor. It reached a long, multi-jointed arm towards the wreckage submerged in the ooze, metallic fingers twitching. Was it trying to repair itself? Or retrieve something? Seeing it distracted, I knew this was my only chance to move. Retreating back through the fissure felt impossible, especially with the shuffling thing potentially still patrolling the main tunnel. I had to find a way through this cavern. I dimmed my flashlight slightly, hoping to make myself less conspicuous, and scanned the cavern walls beyond the creature. According to Grandpa's map, this weak point tunnel should bypass the main route to the mine and potentially lead towards a different, less traveled network of passages further west, away from the feeding chamber. On the far side of the cavern, partially obscured by stalactites dripping with glowing slime, I thought I saw another dark opening, a continuation of the tunnel. Getting there meant crossing the cavern, passing relatively close to both the glowing sludge pool and the metallic-eyed figure. The low hum that permeated the tunnels was still present here, seemingly amplified by the cavern's acoustics. The sirens, however, were completely gone, replaced by the soft, wet bubbling of the sludge and the faint clicking of the creature's eyes as it continued to probe the wreckage. Taking a deep breath, I started to move, staying low, hugging the cavern wall, trying to use the shadows and dripping rock formations as cover. My boots sunk slightly into the damp, fungus-covered earth. Each step felt agonizingly loud in the relative quiet. The creature remained focused on the sludge pool, its back mostly to me. Its metallic fingers had grasped a length of corroded pipe protruding from the wreckage. It pulled, joints creaking, and a section of the tangled metal shifted with a low groan, disturbing the green ooze. A fresh wave of acrid vapor rose, stinging my eyes even from a distance. I kept moving, halfway across the cavern now. The other tunnel entrance looked clearer from this angle, a definite passage leading out. Just a little further. Suddenly, the creature froze. It dropped the pipe back into the sludge with a splash. Its head snapped around, metallic eyes clicking rapidly as they scanned the cavern, zeroing in on my position with terrifying speed. It let out a sound, not a roar or a screech, but a burst of high-frequency static, like a radio caught between stations, that grated on my nerves. It started towards me, its jerky, uneven gait surprisingly fast. Its dragging leg scraped loudly, echoing in the cavern. There was no time for stealth. I broke cover, scrambling over the uneven, fungus-slick ground towards the far tunnel. The creature let out another burst of static and lunged, covering the ground between us in a few lurching strides. I threw myself sideways, slipping on the slimy floor, narrowly avoiding its grasping metallic hand. The tire iron strapped to my pack slammed hard against a rock. I scrambled backwards on my hands and knees, flashlight beam waving wildly, illuminating the creature's featureless face, the expressionless metal eyes, the wires disappearing into its decaying flesh. It loomed over me, static crackling from somewhere within its chest cavity. Desperate, I swung the flashlight, hitting its dragging leg. The impact sounded like metal striking metal. The creature barely flinched, just emitted another burst of static and reached down again. Then, something unexpected happened. The tire iron, jarred loose by my fall or the impact, clattered from my back onto the cavern floor between us. The creature paused. Its metallic eyes clicked, focusing on the heavy iron bar lying on the ground. It tilted its head, the static sound momentarily softening, replaced by a series of low, rhythmic clicks, almost like Morse code? It took a hesitant step back from the tire iron, then another. It looked from the iron bar to me, then back to the iron bar, its movements becoming more agitated, the static returning, harsher now. Was it afraid of the iron? Like the superstition about fey folk and cold iron? Or did it trigger some damaged memory, some association from when it was human? I didn't wait to find out. While it was distracted, I lunged, not for the tire iron, but past the creature, towards the safety of the tunnel entrance just a few yards away. I half ran, half crawled, expecting metallic fingers to grab me at any second. I reached the opening and threw myself inside, landing hard on the dusty floor of the new passage. I spun around, flashlight beam trained back on the cavern. The creature stood where I'd left it, near the tire iron, its body twitching, static crackling erratically. It didn't follow. It just stood there, caught between some unknown directive and its apparent aversion to the simple iron bar. Heart pounding, I scrambled deeper into the new tunnel, putting as much distance as possible between myself and the glowing green cavern. This passage was drier, dustier, like the one that led into the cavern, clearly part of the older mine workings. The acrid smell faded, replaced by the familiar scent of stale air and damp rock. The low hum seemed fainter here too. I ran until my lungs burned, until the yellow-green glow from the cavern entrance was completely swallowed by darkness. Finally, gasping for air, I leaned against the tunnel wall, trying to regain my composure. Safe? Maybe. For now. But utterly lost. The map was useless here, these older tunnels weren't marked. I checked my flashlight, the beam was noticeably weaker. Batteries. I needed to conserve the batteries. Switching the flashlight off, I stood in absolute darkness, listening. Silence. No humming, no sirens, no static, no shuffling. Just the sound of my own ragged breathing and the frantic thumping of my heart. And far off, almost imagined, the faint dripping of water somewhere deeper in the earth. I took a few cautious steps forward, hands outstretched, feeling my way along the rough tunnel wall. After a few blind yards, my hand brushed against something smooth and cold. Metal. I switched the flashlight back on briefly. Embedded in the wall was an old, rusted metal sign, barely legible under layers of grime and corrosion. Black Creek Mining Co., Sector 7G, danger, unstable, authorized personnel only. Sector 7G. It meant nothing to me, but it was something. Evidence that this was, indeed, part of the old mine. But authorized personnel only? Unstable? Not exactly reassuring. I continued onward, using the flashlight sparingly now, relying mostly on touch. The tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes sloping up, sometimes down. Several times, I encountered cave-ins, forcing me to backtrack and find alternate routes through crumbling side passages. Time lost all meaning. Hours could have passed, or maybe only minutes. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a larger space. Not a cavern this time, but a worked section of the mine. Old wooden support beams, thick with dust and decay, held up the ceiling. Rusted tracks for ore carts disappeared into branching tunnels. A broken pickaxe lay abandoned in a corner. It felt like a place frozen in time, untouched for decades. And in the center of this chamber, illuminated by a shaft of faint, natural-looking light filtering down from somewhere high above, was a single, incongruous object. A small, wooden rocking horse, sized for a child, coated in dust but otherwise intact, one painted eye staring blankly into the darkness. Where did that come from? Why was it here? As I approached it cautiously, flashlight beam sweeping the surrounding tunnels, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. Not static, not shuffling, not sirens. A child's giggle. Soft, echoing, seemingly coming from the darkness just beyond the rocking horse. The giggle echoed again, closer this time, bouncing off the unseen walls of the mine chamber. It wasn't malicious, not exactly, but it held an unnerving quality, too high-pitched, too hollow, like the sound was coming through layers of damp earth and time. I froze, flashlight beam darting wildly into the darkness surrounding the faint shaft of light illuminating the rocking horse. Hello. My voice cracked, swallowed by the oppressive silence that fell after the giggle faded. Is someone there? Only the faint, distant dripping of water answered. My light swept across the rusted ore cart tracks, the decaying support beams, the dark mouths of other tunnels leading off from this central chamber. Nothing moved. Was I imagining it? Stress, exhaustion, the foul air in the green cabin, maybe my mind was playing tricks. But the sound had felt so real, so distinct. Cautiously, I edged forward, towards the rocking horse. It sat perfectly still in the weak light filtering from above, a simple, old-fashioned toy, paint peeling, one wooden ear chipped. It looked incredibly out of place here, deep underground in an abandoned mine. Who would bring a child's toy here? And why? Had one of the trapped people, Abernathy, Miller, had a child with them? The thought was horrifying. As I reached the horse, my foot nudged something on the dusty floor. I aimed the flashlight down. It was a small, tarnished silver locket, lying half open near the horse's base. I picked it up carefully. Inside, protected behind faded plastic, were two tiny portraits. One was a man with kind eyes and dark hair, Thomas Abernathy, perhaps. The other was a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. His daughter? The giggle came again, startlingly close, right behind me. I spun around, dropping the locket, heart leaping into my throat. The flashlight beam landed on a small figure huddled in the shadows just beyond the light shaft, near the entrance to one of the darker tunnels. It looked like a child, small and thin, knees pulled up to its chest. It was hard to make out details in the dimness, but it seemed to be wearing ragged, old-fashioned clothes. "Who are you?" I whispered, keeping the flashlight beam steady, my hand tightening on the grip. "How did you get down here?" The figure didn't answer, just rocked slightly back and forth, emitting another soft, unsettling giggle. It sounded less like amusement and more like a nervous tick, or something broken. "Are you lost?" I took a hesitant step closer. "Did you come down here with your father?" I gestured vaguely towards where the locket had fallen. The figure stopped rocking. It slowly lifted its head, looking towards me. I couldn't see its face clearly in the shadows, just the impression of large, dark eyes. "He's gone," the figure whispered, its voice thin and reedy, like a dry reed snapping. "They took him. Long ago." "Who took him?" My mind flashed to the outsiders, to Grandpa's warnings, to the creature in the green cavern. Was it people? Or something else? The figure giggled again, that broken, hollow sound. "Not people. Shadows. The ones that crawl." It pointed a small, grimy finger towards the tunnel it huddled near. "They come from deeper. From the dark places. Shadows that crawl." Was it talking about the outsiders' other forms? Or something different entirely? Are they here now? I scanned the darkness nervously. "Always here," the figure whispered, pulling its knees tighter. "Watching. Waiting. They don't like the light." It gestured vaguely upwards towards the faint shaft illuminating the rocking horse. "This place, safe. For now." This confirmed my suspicion that the weak light, possibly from a surface vent or fissure far above, offered some protection. But safe from what, exactly? And who was this child? Ghost? Or something else pretending to be a child? "What's your name?" I asked, taking another cautious step. "Lily," the voice whispered. "They called me Lily." Lily. Like the name Abernathy's daughter might have had? My gaze flickered back to the fallen locket. "Lily, was Thomas Abernathy your father?" The figure flinched, drawing back slightly. "Don't say his name," it hissed, the childlike quality momentarily replaced by something sharp, fearful. "They listen. The shadows listen." "Okay. Not Abernathy's name. How long have you been down here, Lily?" "Long," she whispered. "So long. Since the blue light stopped." Blue light? The pulsing blue light from the main tunnel? The Siren nights? My mind struggled to connect the pieces. When did the blue light stop? Lily just shook her head, rocking again. "Before the falling rocks. Before the quiet." I remembered the notation on Grandpa's map near one of the tunnels, cave-in, pre-Eli. Had some event sealed off parts of this mine decades ago, trapping this? Lily, down here? Was she Abernathy's daughter, somehow surviving, trapped in time or reality, like the little girl Olivia Hernandez in Chester's story Back at the Fire Tower, inspired element? Or was she just a very convincing, very creepy hallucination? "Can you help me?" I asked, changing tactics. "I'm lost. I need to get out." Lily stopped rocking and looked up again, her dark eyes seeming to bore into me even from the shadows. "Out," she whispered, as if the concept was alien. "There is no out. Only deeper. Or them." She pointed again to the tunnel beside her. "There has to be another way," I insisted, gesturing towards the other dark tunnels branching off the chamber. The map showed. I stopped myself. Mentioning the map felt dangerous. "Paths twist," Lily whispered. "Places change. What was safe yesterday, eats you today." She giggled that broken giggle again. "But maybe the horse knows." She nodded towards the dusty rocking horse. "The horse?" I looked back at the inanimate toy. "What are you talking about?" "He rocks when they're close," Lily said simply. "Rocks towards the safe path. Sometimes." This was getting more surreal by the minute. Talking to a potential ghost child about a magical rocking horse while trapped in a haunted, possibly monster-infested mine. My flashlight flickered violently, the beam dimming to almost nothing before sputtering back to its weak state. Great. Battery was definitely dying. "Lily," I said urgently, moving closer despite my fear. "My light is going out. You said this place was safe. What happens when the light is gone?" Her rocking became more frantic. "They come," she whimpered. "The shadows. They don't like the light, but they hate the dark more. The dark is theirs." Just as she spoke, my flashlight gave a final, pathetic flicker and died, plunging the chamber into near absolute darkness, save for the incredibly faint shaft of light over the rocking horse, barely illuminating its dusty shape. The comforting silence was replaced by a sudden, intense pressure in my ears. The air grew cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something sharp and metallic, like blood and rust. And from the tunnel Lily had indicated, the one the shadows supposedly came from, I heard it. A low, wet, chitinous clicking sound. Getting closer. They're coming, Lily whimpered, curling into a tighter ball. My eyes strained in the darkness, trying to make out her shape, trying to see the tunnel entrance. The clicking grew louder, accompanied by a soft, dragging sound. More than one? Then, the rocking horse moved. Not violently, but a slow, deliberate creak as it rocked forward once, twice, on its curved base. It rocked away from the tunnel where the clicking originated, its dusty wooden head pointing towards a different passage on the opposite side of the chamber. Lily was right. It knew. The horse, I breathed, barely audible. It's pointing the way. No response from Lily. Just the clicking, louder now, almost at the entrance to the chamber. I could hear multiple sets of legs scrabbling on the rock. I had seconds to decide. Trust the ghost girl and the magic rocking horse? Or face whatever was emerging from that tunnel in near total darkness with only a tire iron. Lily, come on. I hissed, taking a step towards the path the horse indicated. We have to go. Silence. Then, a soft whisper from the darkness where she huddled. Can't leave the light. The clicking stopped. A shape, low to the ground, multi-limbed and utterly black, began to emerge from the tunnel entrance, silhouetted against an even deeper darkness within. I couldn't make out details, just a sense of too many legs and a body that seemed to ripple. No time. I turned and scrambled towards the tunnel the rocking horse had indicated, abandoning Lily, abandoning the locket, plunging into the unknown darkness ahead, the sound of chitinous clicking echoing behind me. Blind panic fueled my flight through the absolute darkness. The tunnel the rocking horse had chosen was blessedly wider than the fissure I'd squeezed through earlier, allowing me to run, albeit clumsily, hands outstretched, scraping against unseen walls. Behind me, I imagined the chitinous clicking echoing, the scrabbling of too many legs gaining ground. Lily's whimper, "Can't leave the light," echoed in my mind, a chilling counterpoint to my own desperate need to escape the dark. The floor sloped sharply downwards, and I stumbled, catching myself against the cold, damp rock. The air here was different again, still stale, but without the chemical tang of the green cavern or the thick decay of the basement tunnel. It smelled older, deeper, like undisturbed earth and something faintly metallic, like rusted machinery. How far had I run? Was I even going the right way? The rocking horse's guidance felt like a fever dream now. For all I knew, I was running deeper into the mountain, deeper into the territory of the shadows that crawl. My outstretched hand suddenly hit empty air. I staggered to a halt at the edge of what felt like a precipice. Below, somewhere in the blackness, I heard the unmistakable sound of running water, a subterranean stream. Carefully, I knelt, feeling the edge with my trembling fingers. It felt like a sheer drop, maybe 10 or 15 feet. No way to climb down safely in the dark. Trapped. The clicking sounds weren't audible anymore, but that offered little comfort. They could be silent hunters. I strained my ears, listening for any sound besides the rushing water below and the pounding of my own blood. Then, a faint light. Not the pulsing blue, not the sickly green, but a soft, warm, orange glow, emanating from further along the ledge to my right. It flickered slightly, like firelight. Hope surged, irrational but potent. Was someone else down here? Another survivor? Or something else entirely? Hesitantly, I began to edge along the precipice towards the light, keeping one hand braced against the tunnel wall. The ledge was narrow, maybe 2 feet wide, slick with moisture in places. The sound of the rushing water below seemed to grow louder. As I rounded a bend, the source of the light came into view. It wasn't a campfire. In a small alcove set back from the ledge, stood a single, old-fashioned kerosene lamp, casting a pool of flickering orange light. Next to it, Propped against the rock wall was a weathered pickaxe, similar to the one Lily had mentioned was used to explore the tunnels long ago, and a canvas satchel. Someone had been here. Recently. The lamp was lit. "Hello." I called out softly, my voice absorbed by the damp rock and the sound of the water. "Is anyone here?" Silence. Warily, I approached the alcove. The lamp cast dancing shadows, making the space feel both inviting and treacherous. The pickaxe looked ancient, the wooden handle worn smooth, the metal head pitted with rust. The satchel was buckled shut. Who would leave a lit lamp down here? Was it a trap? A lure? My eyes scanned the shadows around the alcove, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing. Curiosity overriding caution, I reached for the satchel. The leather was stiff, cold. My fingers fumbled with the rusted buckles. Inside, nestled among folds of oilcloth, were several items: a small, leather-bound journal, much like Grandpa Eli's but smaller, a corroded tin box, a compass that spun uselessly, and a tightly rolled bundle of papers tied with twine. My first instinct was to grab the journal. I opened it. The pages were brittle, filled with neat, looping handwriting, faded but legible in the lamplight. It wasn't Grandpa's writing. Entry dated June 14, 1978, followed the weak vein again. Deeper this time. The air changes past the fissure, feels wrong. Found the cavern with the green poison. Nasty stuff. Smells like sulfur and bad intentions. Saw the metal man again. Think it saw me too. Didn't follow. Found old workings past it. Sector 7G signs. Entry dated June 19, 1978. Lily led me to the horse chamber today. Poor thing. Still waiting for him. Left her some jerky. The horse pointed west. Followed the path. Found the stream ledge. Set up camp here. Good spot. Can hear the water. Calming. The shadows don't seem to like it near the drop. Entry dated June 22, 1978. Pressure building. Can feel it in the rock. The hum is stronger tonight. Like before the collapse near the church passage. Something is coming. Need to map the western tunnels more. Found more symbols. Same as Eli showed me. He called them warding glyphs. Seemed to keep the crawlers back. My breath hitched. Eli. Grandpa Eli. This journal belonged to someone who knew him. Someone who knew about Lily, the green cavern, the shadows that crawl, the hum. An Abernathy? The dates matched his disappearance. This had to be his journal. Thomas Abernathy hadn't just vanished. He'd been exploring these tunnels, mapping them, maybe even fighting whatever lived down here, possibly alongside Grandpa Eli. I quickly flipped towards the end of the journal. The entries became sparser, handwriting more frantic. Entry dated July 5, 1978. Hum is constant now. Blue light visible from stream ledge last night. Coming from the east tunnel, the main passage. Heard the sirens faintly. They're getting stronger. Lily is terrified. Won't leave the horse light. Entry dated July 8, 1978. Tried the western passage again. Found a shaft leading up. Can feel fresh air. Maybe a way out? Blocked by rubble. Need tools. Entry dated July 10, 1978. It came through the wall. Not the crawlers. Something else. Tall. Black feathers. Tore through the glyphs like paper. Took the lamp. The light. The entry ended there, trailing off into a jagged line. Black feathers. Like the one I found upstairs. The lamp, he took the lamp Abernathy was using. But this lamp was lit. Had Abernathy somehow survived? Gotten another lamp? Or had someone else come down here after him, relit the lamp, left these things here? My gaze fell on the corroded tin box. Heart pounding, I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. Prying open the rusted lid, I found it packed tightly with something wrapped in oilcloth. Carefully unwrapping it, I revealed several sticks of dynamite, sweating faintly with age, wires, and a crude detonator attached. Abernathy was planning to blast his way out through that rubble-filled shaft. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the tunnel's chill. Dynamite. Decades old, unstable dynamite. Just then, I heard a noise from back the way I came. A faint scraping sound, echoing from the tunnel leading back towards the green cavern. Was it the metal man? Or had the crawlers found this passage too? And simultaneously, a sound from ahead, further along the ledge past the alcove. A soft footstep. Then another. Someone, or something, was approaching from the darkness beyond the lamplight. I was trapped between two potential threats, armed with unstable dynamite, a useless compass, cryptic notes, and a tire iron, standing on a narrow ledge above a dark, rushing underground river. The orange glow of the single kerosene lamp suddenly felt terribly, terribly small. The scraping sound from behind grew louder, echoing wetly up the passage from the green cavern. Simultaneously, the soft footsteps ahead continued their cautious approach along the narrow ledge. Caught in the flickering orange glow of Abernathy's lamp, I felt like a trapped animal, exposed and vulnerable. My hand tightened on the tire iron, the other instinctively hovering over the satchel containing the sweating dynamite, a weapon I feared as much as any monster. "Who's there?" I called out towards the approaching footsteps, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Abernathy? Is that you?" The footsteps paused. A silhouette began to form at the edge of the lamplight, human-shaped, but moving with a strange, gliding stillness. Not the jerky gait of the metal man. "You know that name," a voice replied. Smooth, controlled, familiar. "Arthur." The man in the grey suit. How had he gotten down here? How had he found me? Before I could process his appearance, the scraping behind me intensified, accompanied by a burst of high-frequency static. The metal man. It had followed me. "Seems you've stirred the nest," Arthur observed calmly, stepping fully into the light. He looked remarkably composed, suit immaculate despite the subterranean environment. His sharp eyes flicked past me, towards the tunnel entrance I'd emerged from, then back to me, lingering on the satchel at my feet. "Unstable materials you've got there. Risky. How did you get here?" I demanded, ignoring his comment about the dynamite, keeping myself positioned between him and the tunnel behind me. "There are other ways down," Arthur said cryptically. "Ways known only to a few. Eli knew them. Abernathy found them. And now, so do I." He took another step closer. "Eli send you down here? Or did you come looking for answers on your own?" The static shrieked from behind me, closer now, echoing just inside the tunnel entrance. The metal man was near. "Doesn't matter," I snapped, glancing nervously over my shoulder. "We need to get out of here." "That thing." "Ah, yes. Specimen 7G, Arthur said, nodding thoughtfully. "One of Eli's little projects, I presume? Containment seems to have failed." He sounded almost clinical, detached. "Project?" I stared at him. "You think Grandpa made that thing?" "Eli had unique methods," Arthur replied evasively. "But discussing his ethics can wait. Specimen 7G seems rather agitated." The metal man appeared at the tunnel mouth, filling the narrow opening, its metallic eyes clicking rapidly as they fixed on us, ignoring Arthur and locking onto me. It emitted another burst of static, louder, angrier. It remembered me. It remembered the tire iron, which was still strapped uselessly to my backpack. "Move," Arthur ordered, suddenly urgent. He drew a sleek, futuristic-looking pistol from inside his jacket, not a conventional firearm, it hummed faintly. "Get past me. Along the ledge. There's another passage further down." No time to question. The metal man lunged out onto the ledge, its jerky movements surprisingly fast. I scrambled past Arthur as he raised his humming weapon. He didn't fire a bullet, but a focus beam of intense blue light lanced out, striking the creature square in the chest. The metal man shrieked, a sound like tearing metal and frying circuits, and recoiled, clutching its chest where the beam had hit, sparks showering from the impact point. Wires visible beneath its tattered rags smoked and popped. Arthur fired again, hitting its dragging leg, causing it to buckle. "Go," he yelled, firing a third beam that struck its head, sending it staggering back against the tunnel wall, metallic eyes flickering erratically. I didn't need telling twice. I sprinted along the narrow ledge, away from the alcove, away from the sputtering, sparking creature, deeper into the darkness past where Arthur had emerged. The ground remained narrow, the rushing water echoing loudly from the black abyss to my left. Behind me, I heard another blast from Arthur's weapon, another metallic shriek, then a heavy splash, followed by silence. Had he killed it? Or just knocked it into the chasm? I risked a glance back. Arthur was already moving towards me, weapon lowered but still humming faintly. The alcove behind him was empty, the metal man was gone. "Keep moving," he commanded, catching up to me. "That won't hold it for long if it survived the fall. Those things are resilient." We moved quickly along the ledge, the darkness ahead broken only by the beam of Arthur's flashlight. My own was long dead. "Who are you?" I panted as we navigated a particularly treacherous, crumbling section. "Who do you work for?" "Let's call us interested parties," Arthur replied smoothly. "We monitor anomalies. Contain threats." Eli was an independent contractor, of sorts. Until he went rogue. Rogue? What are you talking about? He was hunting monsters. Arthur agreed. But his methods became extreme. Unsanctioned. That thing back there? Likely one of his attempts to weaponize the anomaly, or perhaps understand it through dissection and reanimation. Dangerous work. Forbidden work. He shone his light ahead. Up here. The ledge widened slightly, leading to another tunnel entrance, this one reinforced with rotting wooden beams like the rocking horse chamber. "This should lead towards an old ventilation shaft," Arthur explained. "If it's not collapsed, it's our way out." We entered the new tunnel, leaving the sound of the rushing water behind. The air here was drier, dustier. "What about Grandpa?" I asked. "Is he like you? One of these interested parties?" Arthur hesitated. "Eli was recruited, yes. Long ago. After his wife, after the incident. We offered him resources, purpose. He was effective. Ruthless, even. But his obsession grew. He started keeping things, experimenting. Refused oversight. He sighed. We lost contact years ago. Assumed he'd retired, or perhaps met his end. His recent activities were unexpected." "Activities? You mean the Sirens? The visitors?" "Among other things," Arthur confirmed grimly. "The energy signatures have spiked dramatically. The barrier, whatever passes for one here, is thinning. Last night was unprecedented." He stopped, shining his light on the tunnel floor. Tracks. Faint footprints were visible in the thick dust, heading in the direction we were going. Small prints. Child-sized. Lily. "She came this way," I breathed. "Who?" Arthur asked sharply. "A girl. Lily. She said she was trapped down here. Said Abernathy knew her." Arthur frowned. Abernathy mentioned a child in his later reports. Assumed it was delusion. "If she's still here." He didn't finish the thought, just quickened his pace. We followed the tracks through twisting passages, past more signs of decay, collapsed sections, rusting equipment half buried in rubble. Finally, the tunnel opened into the base of a wide, vertical shaft. A rusted metal ladder, missing rungs in places, ascended into darkness far above. Faint, cool air drifted down, fresh air. This had to be the ventilation shaft Abernathy mentioned in his journal. And at the base of the ladder, sitting with her back against it, was Lily. She looked up as our lights hit her, her large, dark eyes wide with fear, not at us, but at something further up the shaft. "They know," she whimpered, pointing upwards with a trembling hand. "They know the way out now." Arthur immediately shone his powerful flashlight up the shaft. Far above, maybe 50 or 60 feet, clinging to the ladder and the crumbling walls, were multiple dark shapes. Low, multi-limbed, chitinous. The shadows that crawl. And they were slowly, deliberately, making their way down. Image looking up the shaft, seeing dark, multi-limbed shapes clinging to the ladder far above. We don't have much time, Arthur stated grimly, assessing the rusted ladder. It might hold one of us. Maybe. Lily? I knelt beside her. Can you climb? She shook her head violently, burying her face in her ragged knees. Too high. Too dark up there. Shadows wait. The clicking sound started from above, echoing down the shaft. They knew we were here. Liam, Arthur said, his voice tense. That dynamite. How unstable did it look? I thought back to the sweating sticks. Very, I admitted. He nodded, mind clearly working. Okay. New plan. You take the girl, try to climb. I'll hold them off here. Use this. He handed me his humming pistol. Aim for the head or central mass. It slows them down. Doesn't always kill, but it buys time. What about you? I protested. How will you get out? Arthur gave that thin, humorless smile again. Don't worry about me. I have my own exit strategy. He looked up the shaft, then back at me, his expression deadly serious. Get her out, Liam. Whatever Abernathy or Eli intended, that child doesn't deserve this. Go. Now. He turned, bracing himself at the base of the shaft, weapon raised towards the descending horrors. The clicking grew louder. Hesitating only a second, I scooped up the terrified, whimpering Lily. She felt unnaturally light, fragile as old paper. Hold on tight, I whispered, securing Arthur's strange weapon as best I could. Ignoring the ominous sound from above, I placed my foot on the first, rusted rung of the ladder and began to climb, praying it would hold, praying we could make it out before the shadows reached us. Below, the first blue energy beam lanced upwards into the darkness,